Hello, I'm Pete Fuentes, and I'll be your host for the WMD and Terrorism Awareness for Security Professionals training program. Protecting California is protecting our home. We all have a crucial role in our safety and security. This program will show you how you, a security professional, can be instrumental in preventing terrorist activity aimed at taking away our cherished freedoms and way of life. Please take the time now to open your learner handbook and review the introductory information. Then select the section of the training video you wish to view. The purpose of terrorism is to terrify, to frighten civilians by unprovoked attacks against a group or a nation. One of the most commonly used terrorist tactics is murdering large numbers of people. The white supremacist Buford O'Furl was sentenced to life without parole for his shooting of 5 people, including 3 children at a Jewish community center, and for shooting and killing a Filipino-American postal worker. Furl had previously been chased away from the Simon Wiesenthal Center in Los Angeles by private security professionals. That's before he could have inflicted even more damage. In 1999, a terrorist by the name of Ahmed Rassam attempted to cross the border between the United States and Canada. Rassam was carrying explosive materials in his car that were later determined to be intended to blow up the Bradley Terminal at Los Angeles International Airport. Fortunately, U.S. Customs agents became suspicious of Rassam's hesitant answers to their questions and took him into custody. Rassam was sentenced to 130 years in prison. Terrorist acts are not always against people. For example, some people believe they are in the right when they destroy property to make a point for a cause, such as in the case of the vandalizing of car dealerships or serious arson fires directed at new housing developments.
Some extreme environmental and animal rights groups have adopted new and often violent tactics.
It's been guerrilla warfare all summer out west. The extremist Earth Liberation Front, or ELF, has claimed responsibility for a rash of fires in California, including this $50 million development in San Diego.
The entire history of the organization has never harmed one person.
Former ELF spokesman Craig Rosebrow says property destruction is a necessary tactic.
And the goal is economic sabotage, is to try to inflict maximum economic damage to entities that are destroying the natural environment.
And it's not just environmental extremists. Equally stealthy animal rights radicals also are turning up the heat with an escalating rampage of destruction. In all, these extremists claim more than $100 million of damage across the country. Animal rights activists bombed this Bay Area biotech firm, released 10,000 mink in Washington. Environmental extremists are taking aim at new targets, SUVs and Hummers, torched near LA, peppered with BBs in Houston, tagged in Santa Fe.
They're not proving a point. All they're doing is making people angry.
Driving a Hummer, $50,000 General Motors tool for the rich, 10 miles to the gallon, that is violence. Going in and torching those and getting rid of those, that's an act of liberation, and it should be applauded.
Certainly not the only threat. The widely publicized beliefs of organizations like Al-Qaeda are symptomatic of a terrorist group. Their purpose is to disrupt civilian lives and damage structures in order to inflict the maximum possible emotional, physical, and economic damage. They are especially interested in targets that have symbolic value, such as the World Trade Center buildings. Typical targets are government buildings, mass transit facilities, public buildings, communication, and utility facilities. Also, water supply locations, food production sites, recreational facilities, and any location where large numbers of people gather, such as a stadium, malls, the beach, and so on. This is where you, America's security professionals, work. Your awareness and knowledge are crucial to California's security. Please return to the main menu and turn to workbook activity number 2. Let's consider what a potential terrorist group needs in order to carry out an attack. First, they may need more people to join the organization, so they conduct efforts to increase group membership. Secondly, they need money to travel, rent cars and houses, buy equipment, and so on. Next, they need to select or acquire weapons. The chosen date of an attack may also be important. Terrorists often choose a date of national significance, such as Independence Day. Now they need access to a target site, and this is frequently where you come in. Terrorists will attempt to gain access to the sites they've chosen in order to check them out. They do it by frequently wearing uniforms that make them seem harmless or legitimate, such as cleaning crews. They may also be impersonating police officers. Terrorists also want to know as much as possible about the selected target sites, such as building security measures, the number of possible victims, the target's vulnerabilities, the predictable schedule of incoming and outgoing people and packages, and possible escape routes. The following tape excerpt was captured from a terrorist in Singapore by Singapore intelligence. The terrorist was conducting surveillance of a bus station where his group was intending to plant a bomb. While both the audio and video are somewhat rough because of the amateur taping, you can clearly hear that he is alerting his co-conspirators to the normal flow of people and vehicles at the MRT station called Yishun. You will hear him describing what he is looking for in selecting a target.
U.S. military personnel will be dropped off from the bus and they will walk towards the MRT station. And this is one of the buses, one of the regular buses that ferry the military personnel from Sembawang to Yishun MRT station. So those personnel, after they alighted from the bus, they will move towards the MRT station. As you can see on the far left, with people walking towards the station, they will walk the same way. This is the sign of Yishun MRT station as viewed from the opposite side of the road at block 146. Block 152. This is the bicycle bay as viewed from the footpath that leads towards the MRT station. You will notice that some of the boxes that are placed on the motorcycles, these are the same type of boxes which we intend to use. Beyond those motorcycles, you can see somebody waiting or standing beside a car. That is a pickup point where those personnel will queue up to board the bus or alight from the bus. This is a taxi stand. There's the entrance of the temple with many vehicles parked there. So it will not be suspicious to have a motorcycle or a bicycle there. The pillars of the MRT tracks are very, very solid. You will notice there's a drainage hole. It might be useful.
The next step is also crucial. The terrorists must now attempt to move their chosen weapons into position. This is also a vulnerable point in the process, and one in which your powers of observation are important. If the terrorists succeed in moving their chosen weapon to the site of attack, their next step, unless it is to be a suicide attack, is to escape. What is your role as a security officer in the prevention and possible handling of a terrorist attack? It can be summarized in 3 words: recognize, report, and react. This program will train you how to recognize pre-incident indicators in the stages we just described and show you what you should report about what you notice. Reporting events or suspicions according to your post orders is very important. The program will also show you how to react both in cases of suspicious activity and in the case that a WMD attack occurs. In the following lesson, we will go into more detail about each of the 3 steps and stages. At this point, please return to the main menu and turn to Activity 3 in your Learner Workbook. In this chapter, we will take a closer look at the nature of terrorism. While there are many definitions of terrorism, they all have certain common denominators. First of all, terrorism is a criminal activity. It is important to understand this. Terrorist activity is not an acceptable and normal manner in which to make one's views heard. Secondly, terrorism involves violence against civilians, people like you and me and our families. Thirdly, a terrorist has his or her aim to push a social, religious, or political objective. The goal of the terrorist is to force a government or group of people to change. The next menu selection, The Nature of Terrorism, will give you an introduction to the nature, methods, and purposes of terrorism.
I think what we're doing is very important. That September the 11th has changed the lives of everyone, particularly us in law enforcement. When this first happened, everybody was shocked, they were scared, they were angry, and then confused. And I think today, this entire country is all for those things. And I think what we in law enforcement have to understand is that this is not the destruction of a store. This is a war against the United States of America. And we in law enforcement are going to be the first responders.
We have to realize that terrorism works, and terrorism is easy. It's inexpensive. It's cheap. It has huge lasting effects on society.
I think in law enforcement until 9/11, we were fairly naive about terrorism. It was radical groups within it was internal terrorism, and it was always something that happened overseas. It was something that happened in Middle Asia or in the Middle East. It was things that we looked at and always said may come here, but we never looked at it at a local level. I think 9/11's brought home the fact that it will happen, and it can happen at a local level. These cells are living within our community, they live within our community at large, and they can be anywhere in the state of California. So law enforcement officers have to realize that these people are amongst us now.
In past incidents, there have been many patterns and indicators prior to the incident actually occurring. Officers nowadays have to be able to better respond to and recognize those indicators and those actions prior to the incident, so hopefully we can interdict that incident before it actually occurs.
You might have 10,000 things happen, and only one of those could lead to a terrorist incident, but if we're not aware, and if we don't look for things that could possibly cause it, then we're kind of missing the boat, because terrorism is our newest, biggest realized crime and threat.
The purpose of terrorism. There is almost always a strategy behind terrorist actions. Whether it takes the form of bombings, shootings, hijackings, or assassinations, terrorism is neither random, spontaneous, nor blind. It is a deliberate use of violence against civilians for political or religious ends. Even though most people can recognize terrorism when they see it, experts have had difficulty coming up with an ironclad definition. The State Department defines terrorism as premeditated, politically motivated violence perpetrated against non-combatant targets by subnational groups or clandestine agents, usually intended to influence an audience.
There are plenty of specific definitions, stock definitions from the FBI and other agencies. I prefer a simple one. Terrorism is the use of violence, the threat of violence, to induce fear, and that fear is meant to coerce a change in policies, in government, for political, social, or religious reasons. That change may be to change policies, as I said. It may be simply to remove a government. It may be to stop a practice. For political reasons, to change a government, from a democratic government to a socialist government or any other kind, from a secular government to a religious government.
The point is to use the psychological impact of violence or the threat of violence to effect political change.
As we teach people how to be counter-terrorists, terrorists around the world are teaching people how to be terrorists. and therefore they get better at what they're doing the longer they exist. They not only get better, but they get more lethal, because the frustration to achieve the goals in early terrorist acts leads them to become more desperate and do larger scale terrorist activities.
Unable to achieve their unrealistic goals by conventional means, terrorists attempt to send an ideological or religious message by terrorizing the general public. Through the choice of their targets, which are often symbolic or representative of the targeted nation, terrorists attempt to create a high-profile impact on the public of their targeted enemy or enemies with their act of violence. In doing so, they hope to demonstrate various points, such as that the targeted government cannot protect its own citizens, or that by assassinating a specific victim, they can teach the general public a lesson about espousing viewpoints or policies other than their own.
Terrorism exists and has existed through the ages as a tool for people who have no other way to make themselves heard. They perhaps don't believe in the government, or they have no other voice. A ballot box doesn't work for them. They don't have the strength to fight through force of arms against a larger dominant government, or a dominant race perhaps, if it's an ethnic conflict. So they choose terrorism as a way to make themselves heard, to make their cause heard.
At this point, let's look in more detail at the kind of activity you might observe that could be indicators of a terrorist plan. What kind of things do they do? The first step for a terrorist organization to become viable is to increase its size. They do this by holding rallies, posting recruitment flyers, guiding visitors to their websites, and so on. Be on the lookout for suspicious documents that you find on your site. But keep in mind that freedom of speech and expression is guaranteed by the Constitution.
Fundraising is obviously very important in the terrorist realm. They need money, just like every other criminal entity does. They use the internet quite a bit for fundraising, as well as obtaining funds from governments that are sympathetic to their cause. What we're seeing locally is the trafficking of narcotics, pseudoephedrine, as well as other drugs that are used for profits obtained from the sales are used to fund terrorist organizations in the Middle East, as well as other countries abroad.
Another key step for terrorists is to get money. The easiest way to get money is to steal it. There is no record. ID theft, for example, is on the increase, and using another person's identification is an easy way to illegally obtain cash or merchandise that can be converted into cash. Property that is stolen can also be sold to generate cash. Terrorists frequently commit armed robberies to get quick cash. Naturally, all of these are serious crimes for whatever reason they are committed. If your site handles financial transactions in any way, keep in mind the purposes to which the money can be put. Also, if your site experiences the theft of uniforms, vehicles with company logos, etc., such kinds of activities should arouse your suspicions and be reported. The types of weapons that a terrorist can use are introduced in detail in the next chapter. But at this point, let's list the three main kinds. Conventional weapons such as guns, explosives, and incendiary devices. Chemical and biological agents. Nuclear weapons and radiological material. Here is what you should be on the lookout for. You are looking at various blasting caps to set off an explosion. If you see anything like this at your site, let someone know immediately. This image shows how a small homemade pipe bomb, such as the one in the top left-hand corner, can cause a major detonation. Pipe bombs come in different sizes, but all can easily be carried on a person. Here you can see the components of a homemade bomb in a backpack. All the components are legal and easily attainable. The devastation caused by mass destruction weapons such as explosives can be enormous, as several incidents both in the United States and other countries have shown. Chemical agents are highly toxic, but are used less often because their effect is hard to limit. the best way of preventing their use is to stop theft of chemicals from your site. The potential users have to get into your site to steal this material, and that's where your important position comes into play. Biological agents cause illness and death. Anthrax is probably the best known of these, but any kind of easily infectious disease-causing agent can also spread terror. In addition, the terrorist needs a way to deliver the poisonous substance in the place they want to attack. One simple and effective way is to place the biological agent into the air conditioning or heating system. Nuclear weapons are extremely hard to come by. One possibility is for the terrorists to combine a traditional explosive device with radioactive material, the so-called dirty bomb. Your most important role is to prevent access to, transportation of, or removal of potentially dangerous materials. Once they have chosen a weapon type, the terrorist wants to choose a date of attack. Previously, we have mentioned dates important to our country, such as Independence Day. We should also be aware of other symbolic dates, such as those related to a given religion or dates that correspond to large groups of people being assembled in one area, such as Super Bowl Sunday. Being aware of dates important to different groups and being extra vigilant in the period leading up to such days is crucial. At this point, the terrorist needs to check out the site to assess weaknesses, human and physical, and to conduct dry runs. What should you pay attention to in order to stop them? The idea is to become aware of actions that just don't fit the location and situation. For example, is someone coming closer to a sensitive area than he or she has any valid reason to be? Does she stay in one place for a much longer time than the view deserves? Have you had several such small incidents lately? All those add up to suspicions. In addition, if you find forgotten cameras or equipment in places where there's nothing of tourist interest to photograph, maps, drawings, and cryptic notes would also be something you should report. Finally, anyone asking you questions related to security, such as inquiring about the patrol times of a guard at a power plant, the number of people at the facility, the air conditioning systems, or locations of emergency exits, should be documented and reported. Trying to move a weapon to the target is a terrorist's next challenge. Be on the lookout for nervous behavior or odd clothing for the environment, such as being heavily dressed in the 100-degree heat of summer. Should the weapon be brought in a vehicle, pay attention to large containers and vehicles that appear to be overloaded. Similarly, drivers or operators of any kind of vehicle, including private planes and boats, who do not have current valid operator's licenses should be noted and reported. Also be aware of parked or disabled vehicles in unusual places. Unless this is a suicide operation, the terrorist now needs to escape. The same indicators that made you suspicious of people arriving should cause you to think twice at the time they are trying to leave. They may have less to carry, but they may be more nervous and have a greater sense of urgency. However, if it is a suicide operation, the terrorist does not wish to escape. In the past, we thought we could describe fairly accurately the characteristics of a potential suicide bomber, but this is no longer the case. There is no real profile. Suicide bombs can be delivered by multiple means, such as vehicle bombs, boat bombs, airplanes used as weapons as we saw on September 11th, and a person with an explosive strapped to his or her body. Given that the terrorist does not want to escape, the pre-incident indicators are essentially the same as for non-suicide operations, with the possible extra stress of the knowledge of death leading to hesitancy, nervousness, or extra bulky clothing to conceal a device. All in all, the primary skill for you to develop is a sense for what doesn't fit in. Take a look at the scenario that follows, in which a police officer who makes a routine traffic stop decides that something doesn't seem right.
These terrorist groups or extremist groups may attempt to obtain access to secure areas or secure environments to conduct their next operation. One of the ways they're going to do that is by wearing uniforms, wearing badges, or carrying credentials that allow them to infiltrate these secure areas and gain access to areas they normally wouldn't have access to, so they can blend in with their environment. These are things that we need to look for when we're out in the field. Uniforms, badges, contraband, anything that would allow them to gain access into areas they normally wouldn't have access to. That next vehicle stop, where a person or group is in possession of these items may be stolen, they may be lawfully obtained, but that may be the next stop to taking that piece out of the puzzle to the next terrorist act. So keep your eyes and ears open. Report any suspicious activity to your TLO officer.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
I stopped you for failing to yield to a pedestrian.
Oh, I didn't even see him. I'm sorry.
Okay, do you have your driver's license and registration with you?
Yes.
Can I see those, please? Is this your correct address on your license, ma'am?
Yes.
Is this car registered to you?
Yes, it is.
What year is it?
It's 72, I think.
Okay. Who do all these uniforms belong to?
I don't know.
Where are you taking them to?
I don't know. Wherever I'm told to.
Wherever who tells you?
My employer.
Wherever your employer tells you to take them? Who do you work for?
I work for dry cleaners.
You work for a dry cleaners?
Yes.
What's the name of the dry cleaners that you work for?
It's a place around the corner, the 1 hour cleaners.
1 hour cleaners?
Yes.
Okay, just wait here. I'll be right back, okay?
Okay.
What's going on?
What's going on? What you got?
The driver's got an outstanding warrant, but something's just not right. She has a whole bunch of police uniforms in the car, and when I asked her about where she was going, she didn't know. She said she didn't know where she was going. I asked him who the uniforms belonged to. She said she didn't know. And when I asked her who she worked for, she was real hesitant, real nervous, and she told me she worked for a dry cleaners just around the corner.
Good.
But for right now, I just want to arrest her for the warrant and transport her to the station.
Good deal.
All right.
Watch your hip.
You know, something's just not right about all those police uniforms that she's got in that car, and where she says she's going, and who she says the uniforms belong to, and who she says she works for. It's just not right.
Did you notice those extremist stickers also?
Yeah, you know, I did notice those. I think between all those uniforms in the car and her story and those extremist stickers, I think I'm going to notify Detective Tomasi, our TLO, see if he can respond out here, make him aware of the situation.
Good deal.
Motor 8 River City, can you contact Detective Tomasi and advise him to respond to my location, please?
Unit Motor 8, 10-4.
In this scenario, you saw the potential theft of police uniforms. Keep in mind, however, that other credentials are targets for theft, such as ID badges, key cards, and so on. At this point, please return to the main menu and turn to Activity 4 in your Learner Workbook. This chapter of the DVD will focus on weapons of mass destruction. What are they? A few examples of each, and basic first responder actions which may save your life and the life of others. There are 5 main kinds of weapons of mass destruction. We use the acronym Be Nice to describe them. They are biological, nuclear, incendiary, chemical, explosive. A biological agent is something that makes you sick and spreads easily. They are intentionally induced mass diseases, Examples are bacteria, viruses, and various toxins. Nuclear terrorism can occur in several ways, from a threat of actual deployment of a nuclear bomb to the spreading of radioactive material, which is also toxic, and it is a byproduct of a nuclear reaction. An incendiary device is any mechanical, electrical, or chemical device purposely used to start a fire. A chemical agent can injure or kill by being inhaled into your lungs, by being swallowed, or through your skin. Some examples are those that affect the nervous system, those that could cause skin damage, and those that prevent your blood from absorbing oxygen. An explosive commonly known as a bomb is probably the best known device, and also the most frequently used. Bombs of every kind can cause damage from the initial force of the explosion, from shrapnel, and from the danger of falling objects. The different weapons show their effects in different timelines. An explosion, of course, has an immediate effect on people, while fire or the release of nuclear materials will have an effect within a few minutes. Chemicals will also affect humans very quickly, usually within an hour. On the other hand, bacteria or other biological agents will take more than a few days before people start showing symptoms of illness. Why would a terrorist group choose one weapon over another? It depends largely on the group's amount of money, their access to the target site, and the kind of devastation they want to inflict. The viruses and bacteria needed for biological weapons, those that cause mass illnesses, discomfort, and possibly death, are sadly easy to come by, but difficult to employ and diagnose. We humans have an inborn fear of plague-like terrorism because we feel that we cannot protect ourselves and those we love. However, the disadvantages to the potential terrorists mostly outweigh those advantages. Some examples of biological agents are anthrax, botulism, cholera, plague, and smallpox. As we said before, a nuclear weapon may be either the actual detonation of a nuclear bomb, such as the ones launched over Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the Second World War, or the release of radiological materials. A nuclear bomb would have immense effects on both people and structures, and those effects last a very long time. The psychological impact is enormous. However, despite writing in the popular media, it's not all that simple to get one's hands on the materials needed to create a nuclear bomb, and it is extremely expensive. And the retaliation by the United States would be devastating. Radiological materials, which can cause both immediate acute poisoning and long-term health problems, can be deployed as a secondary component of another weapon, such as a dirty bomb. An example of a dirty bomb would be radiological material attached to a common explosive device, such as a pipe bomb. An incendiary device is something that starts a fire. Such devices are easy to make from materials anyone can buy. Fire is very frightening because it is dramatic, dangerous, and it grows and moves very fast. The terrorists may end up destroying more property than lives. Incendiary devices can be started by chemical, electronic, or mechanical triggers, and they may be left in place, thrown by hand, or self-propelled like a rocket. The C in the Be Nice acronym stands for chemical agents. You may have heard of the nerve agent sarin released in the Tokyo subway system by a terrorist group in 1995. Like biological agents, they are easy to find and steal, easy to make, and relatively cheap. They also have a strong psychological effect on the victim population. The disadvantages to the terrorists make chemical agents less likely to be deployed. However, we should not downplay the possibility of their uses. Should symptoms be present, such as people having difficulty breathing, or unusual smells, or suspicious circumstances, such as unscheduled spraying, the important thing to do is to leave the area and notify emergency responders immediately. By far, the most common weapon of mass destruction is an explosive, a bomb. Over 70% of terrorist incidents involve bombs. They are dramatic, pose little risk to the bomber, and are easy to explode from a distance. The main disadvantages to the terrorists are that they need to gather a lot of intelligence about the site they want to attack. They run many risks of being detected before they can execute the attack. And also, they may or will kill or hurt innocent bystanders. At this point, please return to the main menu and open your student workbooks to activity number 5 for review and discussion. The video that follows was created for the California Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training, or POST for short. This segment from a recent training video emphasizes the use of explosives as weapons of mass destruction, but also introduces other types we have discussed. In this video, the term CBRNE is used for the types we described previously. CBRNE stands for chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and explosive weapons. The video will also use the term TLO when describing a special role for a police officer, a terrorism liaison officer. The video tells the officers to report their suspicions and evidence to the TLO. In your role as a security professional, please report according to your post orders. This is described in the 4th lesson in this program, coordination and sharing of critical information.
Transporting materials to create weapons. As the events of September 11th have shown us, almost anything can be turned into a destructive weapon. Because the materials can be easily obtained, explosive devices are the most commonly used weapon. Both the first World Trade Center bombing and the Oklahoma City bombing were carried out using basic materials such as diesel fuel and ammonium nitrate, or fertilizer. Since this pattern is likely to be repeated, it is important for peace officers to familiarize themselves with the basic ingredients of homemade explosives and become suspicious when these ingredients are being transported or housed covertly. In this scenario, an officer has pulled over what appears to be a gardening truck for a common traffic violation. Because this officer has a basic understanding of explosives, he is able to recognize the potential threat.
Terrorist organizations use different types of weapons. One of the more popular ones is a weapon of mass destruction. Weapons of mass destruction are comprised of materials that are easily obtainable. For example, the device used in the Oklahoma City bombing is comprised of ammonium nitrate and diesel fuel. So be aware of this. While you're out conducting your patrol duties, you may come in contact with people or groups that are transporting these items. And remember, these items are not illegal to possess in themselves. So keep in mind the totality of the circumstances. Report any suspicious activity back to me, your TLO, for further follow-up.
How we doing?
Hi. Hello.
Good. The reason I pulled you over, you just ran that red light back at the intersection. Can I see your driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance, please?
Well, my brother don't speak English good.
I'm sorry for mistake, officer.
Okay. Driver's license?
Driver.
You have the registration to the vehicle?
Well, yeah.
Who owns the vehicle?
No. Cousin? My cousin.
Your cousin?
Your cousin.
Cousin owns the vehicle? Okay, I noticed that your international driver's license expired. Do you have another license from your country, California driver's license with you? Anything?
No.
No?
Sorry. No.
No.
Okay, do we have our passports with us?
Pasaportes.
Please.
You work in this area?
We lost.
Freeway.
Okay. Knows the equipment back here.
Garden work.
Garden.
You don't mind if I take a look, do you?
No. Please.
Okay, sit tight. Hold on, okay? Okay. I'm gonna go check some things out, okay? Like I said, I noticed that your driver's license expired. I'm gonna go run some checks right quick. I just need you to sit right here, okay?
Okay.
Just sit tight, okay?
Okay.
All right, stand. River City D11, could you go ahead and start me a tow truck and another officer for the impound, please?
Unit D11, 10-4, tow en route.
10-4.
What have you got?
Hey, how you doing? Just pulled a couple guys. They ran the red back there, blew the intersection. International driver's license, expired. Registration of the vehicle is not their vehicle. They say they're gardeners. Dress really well. Looked at all the equipment back there. Brand new equipment, brand new gardening equipment. Got several bags of ammonium nitrate. Look, they got a couple cans of gas back there, gas containers. Smells like diesel. So
These are their passports?
Yeah, take a look at them.
You know, these are from 2 different countries. This one's got a page missing. Maybe we need to talk to these guys.
Well, I got a tow truck started already because I'm going to go ahead and take the vehicle no matter what because they're not licensed. So we'll go ahead and pull them out, search and everything else, and go from there.
Let's do it.
All right, we got a couple problems. The driver's license expired, so what I'm going to do is impound this vehicle, okay?
Officer, sorry, my cousin car, I'm so sorry.
I understand it's your cousin car, but you don't have a driver's license, so I'm going to have to take the vehicle, okay?
I'm sorry, sir.
All right, so what I need you to do is I need you to step outside the vehicle, okay? Okay, what's the deal with the maps? The maps in the car.
I don't know.
You don't know?
No.
You don't know who maps these are?
No.
Okay. All right. These maps, a lot of major points of interest. Airports, amusement parks, major theaters. We got diesel fuel, at least 40 bags of ammonium nitrate inside the vehicle.
Okay, so we've got most of the components that we need to make explosives. We've got an altered passport. We've got two guys that say they're gardeners and don't look like they're gardeners, and we've got maps with possible targets on them. We got a couple of really good FIs on the guys. Let's see if we can call TLO.
Let's contact them. River City, D11. Could you go ahead and roll Detective Tomasi to my location, please?
Let's review the key learning points of this scenario.
You work in this area?
We lost. Freeway.
Knows the equipment back there.
Garden work.
You don't mind if I take a look, do you?
No, please.
Sit tight. Hold on, okay?
It is important that you're able to recognize common items that can be used to construct an explosive weapon of mass destruction, such as diesel fuel and ammonium nitrate. Other types of weapons of mass destruction include biological agents, nuclear and radiological materials, incendiaries, chemical agents, as well as explosives. There are many methods of obtaining materials to make weapons of mass destruction, some of which may occur within your jurisdiction. These methods include theft from either commercial or military storage facilities, theft while materials are in transport, or purchase of materials from the black market.
Obviously, throughout the world in the United States, the weapon of choice is explosives. It's the easiest to get a hold of. They're very common. You can make them, with basically a hardware store equipment. We're going to talk, and you're going to see ANFO, which is nothing more than ammonium nitrate, which is a fertilizer, basically. You can buy it at any garden supply store. And fuel oil, which is diesel fuel. It's 94% ammonium nitrate, 6% diesel fuel mixed together with an explosive charge, and there you have the Oklahoma bombing, just a small moving van full of fertilizer. That was a small van. So what we're going to see here most likely is those types of explosives being used. They're easy to attain.
If you could explode a van full of fertilizer with diesel fuel, you can get a van anywhere, you get fertilizer anywhere, and you get diesel fuel anywhere. That's what's more simple than that. You can't rob a bank that simply. You rob a bank, you have to have guns and threats and a real plan. But you can use a credit card and go out and buy everything you need to do to explode an entire neighborhood.
These maps, a lot of major points of interest. Airports, amusement parks, major theaters. We got diesel fuel, at least 40 bags of ammonium nitrate inside the vehicle.
Okay, so we've got most of the components that we need to make explosives. We've got an altered passport. We've got two guys that say they're gardeners and don't look like they're gardeners, and we've got maps with possible targets on them. We've got a couple of really good FIs on the guys. Let's see if we can call TLO.
Remember, coming across individuals who possess materials to construct weapons of mass destruction should always be treated as suspicious activity. Always document this activity and report it to your TLO.
On this stop, where you're seeing, two people, with a multiple of signs and symbols in the car. Example, it's a late model pickup truck. They say they're gardeners. They've got new gardening equipment. Their passports and identification seem a little bit strange. You now have learned that ammonium nitrate and diesel fuel creates, quote, the Oklahoma bombing, or it could be anywhere. First World Trade Center bombing. That should be a first symbol to the line officer. Something's wrong. Something's wrong. There wouldn't be a reason to have these kinds of chemicals. It just doesn't fit.
What you may see is an international driver's license from a European country and a passport from one of our target countries, whether it's from the Middle East, the Philippines, or adjoining countries. That's something that may probe you to do a little bit further investigation, get as much information as you can. Look through the passport, whether you're trained or not in identifying a false passport, look and see for the obvious pages torn out to try to throw off agencies or the authorities on what countries they've been to prior to coming to the United States. Many times they'll obtain an international driver's license for a European country to kind of throw off authorities on where they're from or where they've been or where they're en route to. So those are just some key points to focus in on when you're out there doing your job.
The officer should question the person about the item that he feels is suspicious and watch the reaction of the person. It's very important to these people to get these components together in a timely fashion, especially if they're planning an event in a short time. Concentrating on that item may prove to be the breaking point in that questioning period.
Guns and conventional explosives have so far remained the weapons of choice for most terrorists. Such weapons can cause many casualties and are relatively easy to acquire and use. But some terrorist groups now show interest in acquiring the capability to use chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear materials, otherwise known as CBRN. It is difficult to predict the likelihood of a CBRN attack, but most experts agree that today's terrorists are seeking the ability to use such agents in order to cause mass casualties. On September 11th, terrorists redefined the term weapon of mass destruction. Up to that point, that term generally referred to chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear agents. September 11th increased the uncertainties regarding the threat of chemical or biological attacks. Terrorists were willing to commit suicide in these attacks, showing no concern for their own personal safety, which has long been considered one of the barriers to using chemical or biological agents. And most recently, the threat of anthrax has gone from a series of hoaxes to actual cases under investigation by the FBI. Still, these chemical and biological weapons confront terrorist groups with significant technical challenges. While lethal chemicals are easy to come by, getting large quantities and weaponizing them for mass casualties is difficult. Biological agents can more easily be acquired in nature or from medical supply houses, but important aspects of handling and dispersion are daunting. The 1995 release of a chemical agent in a Tokyo subway demonstrated the difficulties that terrorists face in attempting to use chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear weapons to produce mass casualties. The terrorist group responsible for this attack used scores of highly skilled technicians and spent tens of millions of dollars developing a chemical attack that killed fewer people than conventional explosives could have. That same terrorist group failed totally in a separate attempt to launch an anthrax attack in Tokyo. To date, only nation-states have demonstrated the capacity to build radiological and nuclear weapons.
I think if it's going to happen, it will probably happen with locally available materials. A chlorine gas tank, that any high school with a pool has a huge chlorine tank, that if it gets vapor in the air, you're going to hurt a lot of people. I think that's what they need to be aware of is the things on their beat that are going to hurt them. Chemical tanks. We have a nuclear reactor in the county. We have all sorts of different manufacturing capabilities. Any manufacturing plant, a chrome plating plant's got cyanide. Those are the kind of things that are going to be more dangerous than a terrorist bringing in a nuclear weapon. I mean, it's possible, yes. I don't know how likely it is, but I think it's going to be more of a what's available on hand for these guys to use, and they're going to use that kind of situation.
Terrorists tend to follow kind of a maturity curve, if you will. They may start in their formation times small, as they recruit, as they train, as they build, and they learn over time as their acts tend to mature. They may develop more sophisticated weaponry, both when they can afford it and through, unfortunately, trial and error. One example might be the IRA or the Provos, the provisional wing of the IRA, and their bombings in Northern Ireland. Much of what we've learned about improvised explosive devices and much of what we use in our bomb disposal units here in the States comes from the years of the Troubles in Ireland. As the Provost developed more and more sophisticated devices, as they matured, if you will, and the British response forces learned better and better techniques for disabling those devices, they grew in sophistication.
As security professionals, you will in most cases not stop vehicles and make arrests. However, the point of the video you watched is to remind you to be vigilant and suspicious of unusual behavior. Please return to the main menu and go to Activity 6 in your workbook. In the previous segments, we have introduced the indicators of, choices of, and effects of weapons of mass destruction. In the following segment, we will consider a scenario of an event which has occurred and what you could and should do. Your first action is to call for assistance. Secondly, as hard as it may be, you need to keep yourself from becoming a victim of the incident. How can you help people if you are unconscious? While you are not a trained first responder, it is useful to know what those first responders will need and how you can contribute to everyone's safety. After the segment, there will be time for discussion. At the end of the segment, you will be able to 1. Describe whom you would notify in the case of a weapons of mass destruction incident. 2. Isolate or evacuate persons. And 3. Be able to know how to protect yourself so you don't become a victim. The first stage of action for you is to notify first responders and your superiors according to your post orders. Use a landline if at all possible. Since you already know very well how your site is organized, selecting the safest approach route for the first responders should be possible for you. Your first priority is life, your own and everyone else's. Incident management means preventing a problem from becoming even more serious. Be prepared to answer questions that the first responders will ask about the incident. As you are calling for assistance, stay on the line after the dispatcher has gathered all necessary information or until it gets to be unsafe for you to stay there. The first issue in the aftermath of a WMD attack is whether to shelter people in place or to give orders to evacuate. Your post orders will tell you who has the authority to order an evacuation. In helping law enforcement and other first responders with this stage, you are performing an important function. As we mentioned before, the evacuation decisions depend on company policy, your post orders, and whether the buildings are public or private. Being aware of your post orders is crucial. Review them. If you don't have your post orders, ask your supervisor for them. The decision to shelter in place versus evacuation depends on accurate assessment of the situation and has many variables that must be considered. If the situation involves hazardous materials, you should first take careful note of the wind direction. You and other people who may be exposed will want to first move crosswind and then upwind to avoid exposure. In the case of an incident involving weapons of mass destruction, expect mass hysteria. The more order and calm reassurance you can provide, the better. Help as much as you can. Consider the possibility of secondary devices and try not to move anything. Stay alert about possible suspicious activity and articles that don't belong. Focus on protecting evidence as well as victims. You cannot help others if you are unable to function, so your self-protection is essential. Do not become a victim. Do not rush in. Assess the situation and keep your distance. Try to determine the wind direction. Do your best to avoid contaminated areas. Consider the three main concepts in protective measures: time, distance, and shielding. Time means to subject people for as short a time as possible to the hazard. Time is of the essence to save lives. Time also means the danger will lessen the more time passes. Distance means avoiding contact with a contaminant. And shielding means using any protection you have available. In conclusion, your first task is always to notify the proper authorities while keeping yourself safe. Secondly, To help the victims as much as possible, try to put as much time and distance between them and the danger as you can. Finally, shield yourself and the persons in your area from the hazards using any physical means you have available. Your calm and reassuring presence will help. At this point, please return to the main menu and turn to Activity 7 in your workbook. You may still be wondering, where do I fit into this picture? What can I do? You have a very important role to play. The first step in preventing a WMD attack is knowledge, knowing what to look for. The previous 3 lessons in this program have given you a brief overview of what terrorism is, what terrorists want, and the types of weapons they intend to use. While it is important to be able to rescue people and protect property in the event of a WMD attack, it is more important to prevent the attack from occurring in the first place. So we have focused on giving you various pre-incident indicators to recognize. You know your location and your site inside out. You may be the best person to recognize something is out of place, something odd, something that just doesn't fit. Reporting such observations through the proper channels of your post orders may be just the action that prevents another incident like the criminal attacks on September 11, 2001. For our common protection, the United States has a unified approach to information gathering and information sharing. When you make your report to your supervisor, he or she will pass that information along to the proper authorities, which in many cases is law enforcement. The law enforcement community has a set of responsibilities for a specially trained officer called a TLO, or Terrorism Liaison Officer. The TLO, or any sworn officer, will move the report along through proper channels. Thousands of small pieces of information flow into the intelligence databases every day. Trained analysts store, organize, and tag such pieces of data for potential tracking and follow-up. Most of the time, of course, the activity is harmless, or what one might call normal criminal behavior. But what if it isn't? In the following excerpt from a law enforcement training program, various experts describe the interrelationship between the small pieces of data reports to the larger intelligence effort.
Terrorism is the responsibility of local law enforcement. You know, the responsibility, we have a duty to collect and prevent these kinds of acts. And the way we're going to do that is truly by getting the intelligence, seeing that one little sign or symptom, seeing that blasting cap, seeing that false ID, seeing that ID theft. That's how we're going to prevent this big picture explosion.
Terrorism has become more of a local threat. Now, obviously, since what happened on September 11th versus something that just used to happen overseas in a place you couldn't pronounce. And now we're using the police officers and their expertise in their community with community policing to provide intelligence and community awareness and public education to all the people in their jurisdiction, which overall helps the law enforcement capabilities in that jurisdiction.
The local law enforcement officer is the first one to notice a new extremist group, be it a religious group, be it an ethnic group, and so forth, an increase in rhetoric in the neighborhood for any given reason, a change in graffiti on the street, a change in the threats that appear to be coming from the neighborhood. The local officer is going to be the first to see that. And it's the job of the local officer to, instead of trying to call out what you think might be just a small fragment and not important information, get it into the state information system, where hopefully it gets into the federal information system. Somebody puts that together and analyzes that information, then that becomes intelligence that can be used to make an arrest or be used to stop an event in the crisis arena before it gets to the consequence arena.
Terrorism is something that can be prevented, but it's going to take a coordinated effort between all levels of law enforcement. Patrol officers, there's more of them in the field than anyone else. They're the ones that are going to be seeing things. They're the ones that are going to be out on routine radio calls, traffic stops. They're the ones that are going to see many of the indicators. They're the ones that are going to end up interdicting a potential terrorist action.
Well, I think it's probably the most important role. It's my belief, and I think with good reason, that probably the next terrorist event will be prevented by a patrol officer who is doing a good job, who takes that step to look a little further, asks a few more questions, and then that information comes to a person in my position. It's forwarded to other agencies, and it may be just part of a bigger puzzle, but it may be the significant information to prevent an act of terrorism.
We know from prior history that one of the hijackers received a ticket 2 days prior to 9/11. So there you go. There was an officer who initiated a traffic stop of a future hijacker, issued him a ticket. So if law enforcement can learn or keep an open mind to who they're stopping and why they're stopping them, we may be able to identify, if not stop, the next terrorist attack just from a routine traffic stop.
I believe if terrorism happens in this country, if terrorist acts continue to occur, that at a local level, the law enforcement agents, the police officers, and deputy sheriffs, and state patrols will be the actual ground troops in stopping these things. I don't think they have the wherewithal to stop them if they don't interact with each other and keep each other informed.
They're the foundation. They're the ground level. If anything occurs, it's as a result of the efforts of the patrolmen at the street level, far more than any organization with any acronym that we can associate. It's the line officer, the beat officer. They're the ones who interface on a daily basis with the public, and they're the ones who pick up the tidbits of information, the fragmented information, the little tiny bits and pieces of information that once they're put together in a mosaic, hopefully will provide some kind of an indication from which a command staff, an organizational policy can be established, and then maybe even on a tactical level a reaction can be mounted that might mitigate or obviate some kind of a significant threat a la 9/11.
I think the most important thing is for them to understand from the beginning that it is their fight. I still think in some organizations, some police officers, some police chiefs, some sheriffs, some deputies out there do not quite understand yet that they play a vital role in this war. For lack of training, lack of understanding, or just lack of willingness to become involved, that they are essential and crucial to the overall safety of the country.
While this video segment has shown the role of a law enforcement officer, the points apply equally to you as a security professional. We hope this training has been useful to you. In order to secure our safety, your ability to observe and forward your observations is crucial. Keep in mind the 3 words: recognize, report, and react. Follow your post orders and stay alert. Please complete the final activity in your workbooks. And thank you.